It's the end of the spring season, and I'm going to talk about the anime that I've been watching. But I decided to do things a little differently this time, just like I do every single time I do one of these reviews. Instead of waiting until the end of the season, I'm just going to record as I finish shows. I think this is going to work out better in the long run, but we'll see. It will mean that I'm going to have to make a video on multiple different days, so you will get to see all of my different hairstyles and my mini shirts. But seriously, spoiler alert for all of the anime. I'm not going to guarantee that I'll get into any of the stories, but just in case, I figured I'll go ahead and give a warning now. I'll put timestamps just to make it easier to skip over shows that you don't want to be spoiled on. But we'll go ahead and get started with the show that didn't air this season at all. Pop Team Epic. Why did I watch this show? It's 100% because Hachima's on break right now. One of the comments, I think, said it best. The show is just shit posting on steroids. As you can see, I binged watched 2 seasons of this show. And after 2 seasons, I still don't think I could fully describe what this show is about. It is both simple and not simple because there's no actual story to it. It's more sketch comedy, I guess. But the art style changes constantly, the voice actors change constantly, and about the only story that's told is through the end credits. The previews that are normally in an anime were used to describe an actual anime that doesn't exist. I was so confused watching the first episode because it starts off like a normal anime opening and then it goes to the skits, which aren't connected to anything whatsoever, and then it gets to the preview for the next episode and it's an entirely different anime. And that's what they did for the entire first season is they told a story what you would normally see for an anime using only the previews. And that's only one part of the confusion. So it's a normal 24-ish minute show, but it does half of it, and then the second half it replays the first half, but using different voice actors. So if you've watched half of it, you've basically watched the entire thing. The second half will sometimes have slight differences to the sketches and stuff, but they're close enough. And let me tell you, I watched all 24-ish minutes to every episode. And even above that, I watched some episodes in English and Japanese because I loved the voice actors. With all that being said, this is good, stupid humor. And I kind of knew that going into it, so that's where my expectations were. So I really enjoyed this. But I also have the opinion that if you're not in the mood for stupid humor, then it's just not going to be good. So I can understand why I didn't hear a whole lot about this show when it first came out. And that's also why I have trouble recommending this anime. If you're in the mood just to sit down, relax, turn your brain off, and watch some humor, then it might be a good one to watch. But even then, I would say don't binge watch it like I did. Halfway through the second season, I was pretty done. My desire for stupid humor had faded, so the second half of the second season was basically just background noise to me, and which I don't think it had anything to do with the actual show. It was more of my mood had changed enough that I just wasn't interested in really watching it at that point. So overall, I would say that it is entertaining, but only if you're in the mood for it. Dr. Stone, New World. Science is back, and I'm something of a scientist myself, or at least I like to pretend to be. By the time this comes out, I'm sure I'll be done pretending that I understand quantum mechanics. So, needless to say, the science in the show is a big reason that I got into it. And I gotta say, this season, I wasn't really all that impressed. I'm honestly not all that interested in the overall story, and that's kind of where they've decided to start putting more of the focus, which means the actual science is starting to take a back seat. And this is something that I kind of started to feel during the last season, but it still wasn't that bad. And this season, I feel like they just kind of said, fuck it. And there was a whole lot less science, in my opinion. I mean, they've spent half the episodes saying that they were looking for platinum. And then by the time they found it, it was a quick 2-second explanation of what they were using it for. I don't even think they got into exactly what was happening. They just said, hey, we have platinum and I put it in here and this is what's happening. And that was it. And I get it, this is an anime. They're going to have to focus on the story at some point. But I feel like expectations is kind of the theme for this season for me. Because when I watched Pop Team Epic, my expectations going in were that it was going to be a stupid comedy, and that's what it was. So I was entertained. But when it comes to Dr. Stone, I kind of have an expectation of there's going to be science. So when the show actively lacks on that, then I'm going to be disappointed. And maybe my expectations just need to change on the show overall. I'm not sure. But I imagine I'll probably end up watching next season just to see where things go. But this may be one of the shows that I just kind of start to fall out of favor for me personally. So guess we'll just see. But it's still not a bad season. It's just wasn't that great in my opinion. Demon Slayer. I'm actually wearing a Demon Slayer shirt right now. Representing. The shirt is very faded and it's shrunk, so it's very small. Well, I can't actually wear this shirt in public very much anymore, but whatever. I'm still representing. Anyway, I do like this story, and I'm glad that they're following along with the manga. I've been on the fence about whether I want them to actually do the manga ending, because I'm not a huge fan of it, but that's a discussion for a different time, I guess. For now, I am glad that they are actually following along, because I think the manga does a really good job with the story at this point. But it looks like we're getting to the end game now, so we'll see if what they decide to actually do with the ending. And I know I've seen a lot of people who aren't huge fans of this show. I mean, some of it's going to be just because it's popular, so there's always going to be some people who hate it just because it's popular. But I think there are still some valid criticisms. I absolutely hate the flashbacks. They have like the worst timings for the flashback. It's always in the middle of a fight, as the fight's starting to get good, about to wrap up. Like, no, stop, stop, stop. You need to know about this person. And they'll take up so much time. Like, they'll cut in, and then they'll spend an entire episode of backstory, and then they'll cut back into the fight. And I like backstory. I don't want to make it seem like I don't. I do like backstory. I feel like the bigger issue is the timing more than anything. Because I hate when they cut up the action, basically. And everybody gets one. Good guys get a flashback. Bad guys get a flashback. I'm going to end up getting thrown in next season. I'm going to have a flashback. Luckily, it'll be pretty short and boring, so it's not going to take up a whole lot of time. But But for me, it's not a deal breaker. I can kind of understand how someone else could come in and see it as a deal breaker and not want to watch the show. But for me, it's kind of more of an annoyance, and an annoyance that's not going to change at this point. They've only got a couple of seasons left. Oh shit, speaking of which, I need to apologize to a random person who is never going to see this. I talked to a girl at a gas station like months ago, and I told her that there was only like 2 seasons of Demon Slayer left. And I don't know, thinking back on it now, I have no idea how I came to that conclusion. I completely forgot about this season that just happened. I completely forgot about some other stuff that's going to happen. And I feel bad about, because she looked a little bit sad hearing like there's not as much left of the story. And now I feel bad for not intentionally lying, but I basically misinformed her. So if you ever see this, I am sorry. All right, let's talk about the animation, because the animation is honestly what makes Demon Slayer so popular. It just kind of is what it is. But they've done an amazing job with how it looks. It looks amazing, this season included. But there was some CG, and I As a CG hater, must talk about it. All right, so in the season, they had some, and the most obvious one was the stone snakes, I guess they would have been. Um, and I'm kind of on the fence, honestly, about how I feel about them. On one hand, I don't like how they look. I mean, there's, I don't know if that's the CG aspect of it or what, but there was just something about it. I imagine that's probably what it is. I imagine any kind of CG I have a negative opinion of just off the bat. And so I didn't really like how they looked. But at the same time, I don't think they look terrible. And this is probably coming from just seeing so many bad CGs in anime that this didn't look like complete dog shit. I didn't feel like stabbing my eyes with a rusty nail or knife or whatever. So, improvement. But seriously, I am curious about how other people view the CG in this anime because I am not completely sure, and I haven't really looked up anything, so I'm not sure what other people are saying. And that may be something I end up doing just to kind of see. But to me, I would still rather them not do it. At the end of the day, I would rather them do something else that looks better. But at the same time, I understand shit happens. There are constraints, money, time, whatever. So sometimes it has to be used. And this is not the worst. So I guess I'm okay with it and I'll just let it be what it is. But I think they're doing a great job with the show. So I look forward to seeing the rest of the seasons. Vinland Saga. I have no enemies here. Such a good line, even though I disagree with it. Which isn't important, I guess. Well, it kind of is important to the story, so let's just talk about the story first, I guess. Season 2 is a slow burn, and it is very different from the first season. I've seen so many people who hated the second season because of how different it is from the first season. I personally liked the second season, but I also understand why so many people did not like this season. Once again, we're back to expectations. The first season was action packed, and then the second season comes around and there's, I don't know, two, three fights sprinkled into 24 episodes. So it would be like me walking in expecting a comedy and then getting romance. I would be a little frustrated to say the least. Now, for me, I kind of expected the story to be a little different. The way the first season ended, it kind of seemed like they were going to be taking it a different direction. And I wasn't expecting it to be as different as it was, but I wasn't really. I didn't have the expectation that it was going to be as action packed as the first season. So for me, I came in and expecting it to be different, and it was completely fine. Like I liked what they did with the story. For me, and probably the other people that liked this season, it was more about the overall story being told. The first season was about getting trauma, and the second season was about getting over that trauma. So seeing the overall story, I really liked it, and I found it enjoyable to watch. But I'll go ahead and confess that I got hooked on the first season because of all the action. So I can't really hate on the people that liked the first season and didn't like the second season. It's just the inner Thor fiend in me coming out, I guess. So I guess the entire point of me saying all this is to say that if you haven't seen the second season yet, you need to check your expectations beforehand. Because it will greatly change how much you like the second season. All right, real quick, let's talk about the art style or art direction. I'm not even sure what it would fall under. So, this show likes to do close ups, and whenever they do it, it's normally very detailed. So, they'll zoom in on someone's eyes and they'll be very, very detailed and well drawn. And those, I'm all for that. But I think, if I remember correctly, and it's again, this was 24 episodes long. This was a long time ago from the beginning of the season. But I think at the beginning, there was a lot of close up shots on like mouths and stuff. And it was very detailed and a little weird, I think. And maybe weird's not the best way to put it, but it's more of it seemed to happen a lot. Like they really wanted you to see people's teeth. So maybe to each their own, I guess. But for me, this was a. I kind of learned that I did like the detailed, zoomed in shots, but maybe in moderation. Konosuba. We got another season of Konosuba. And this one's actually a prequel. It leads directly into the first season, and it just kind of follows Megumin and what she was up to before joining in with the rest of the group. For the most part, it's exactly what you would expect. The storytelling is great, the humor is great, but there is one thing that I want to complain about. I did like this season, but it felt like something was missing. In the what made the first couple of seasons great was that the main cast would play off of each other. Both of their positive and negative sides would work together to make the humor better. And we do get some of it with Megumin and Yunyun, but I don't know. For me, it just wasn't the same. It's not as good as what we got through the first couple of seasons. And I'm trying not to make this sound like the show is bad. I do think this season was good, but my bar for Konosuba humor and storytelling is apparently too high. Or maybe it was just this season, I don't know. But there's really not much else to say. It's just more Konosuba. It's more of the same, which isn't really necessarily a bad thing. There's a reason the show is so well liked, and as long as they keep delivering, I'll keep watching. The Ancient Magus Bride. I have no idea if I'm saying that right or not. I That's what I think is how you're supposed to say it, but I don't know. I'm probably wrong. But Harry Potter with better storytelling and world building is back for a second season. I've got pros and cons for it, but overall, I would say this season was fine, which kind of leads into my cons. My big issue with this season really has nothing to do with the show itself. It has just been so long since I've seen the first season. When did the first season come out? I don't even remember. But I don't remember a whole lot of the details that happened in the first season. So watching this season, I remember the overall story, but then all of a sudden people will come up and start talking, and I don't remember who the fuck they are. I don't remember any of those the little details that kind of add into the story, because this show does a great job with the storytelling, but if you don't remember shit, then the story doesn't impact as well. And again, this is more on me than anything. I think if I would have realized that beforehand, I probably would have just went back and rewatched the first season just to kind of get a reminder of what was going on. Because that's honestly what I felt like watching this season. I just wasn't connected to the story as much as I was the first season. The first season I really liked. It had me hooked. And then this season I just wasn't. There's no other way for me to put it. But I don't think that's on the show itself. I really think it was just me not remembering anything. Or I still remembered some stuff, just not as much as I would have liked. And that probably does play into my overall idea of this season, because they start introducing more characters in this season, and honestly, I just don't give a shit about any of them. There are a few of them that sure I would like to know more about, but overall I just don't care. There's no nicer way of saying it, but I think part of that is because I was still trying to remember what happened in the first season and trying to figure out how they connect to the overall story. But I don't think that is as big of a thing with the new characters. Is probably just my overall outlook of the show in general. So I feel like I'm being too critical here. Let me move on to some positives. The world building is still great. The story for this season is fine. It's not as good as the first season, but also this is like half of what was the first season. The first season I think is 24 episodes. This has only been 12. I fucking hate that they break it up, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So the overall story is great. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say. But what I really like, what I think this show does an amazing job with, is the relationship between the two main characters, Chisei and Elias. their relationship, like watching it kind of develop as the story continues, has been great. Because throughout the season, they are learning who they are and who they are in the relationship. But at no point does it feel like it's forced. Like they are just going through the story normally, and as they learn things, they actually go to the other person and talk to them. And that's one of the things that I think is very important in a any kind of relationship, I guess, communication. And this show, I think, does a great job with it because they once they figure out something, they just go and have an open and honest like talk with the other person, and it actually feels like there's some growth between them. So that is something that I hope that they continue to do with the story going forward, is that relationship specifically. But I'm probably going to end up having to go back and rewatch the first season and now the first part of this season just so I'm not lost through the next part. Dead Mount Death Play. All right, we got to go on a little tangent here real quick. Dorarara is one of my favorite animes. Bakuno was absolutely amazing too. And the guy who wrote the stories for both of those also wrote the story for this one. And I don't know what it is, but apparently I absolutely love the stories that this guy tells. So, needless to say, I went into this with high expectations, and I was not disappointed. I like isekais and reverse isekais, and two of the things that I tend to look for to help distinguish good shows from bad ones is one, using some knowledge from their past life. If if there's no reason for it to be an isekai, it just kind of bugs me a little bit, honestly. Like if they could have done the entire show without it ever being an isekai and just having someone born in that world and living, then just make it a fucking fantasy, okay? That's just again me nitpicking. The other thing is being strong without being OP. I think if at a certain point when you're just stomping everybody, it becomes boring pretty quick. So I would rather see someone who is strong in their new world without being completely overpowered. And that's what we see in the show. Spoilers, I guess, but he is a necromancer born into another world. So he uses that knowledge to kind of help him out in our world, I guess is what it is. Well, close enough to our world. But he is also like he was a little more OP in his world, but now that he is here, he is less OP because he's born in Japan where there's less spirits, I guess. I'm imagining that's more of a people are more content with life, so they move on. Will be my guess, but the main gist is that he has less spirits to work with, so he is not as strong as he was in his own world. And that in and of itself isn't going to make a great story. What makes it a great story is the circumstances. He wasn't reborn. He was basically placed. I'm not really sure what happened. He's in someone else's body, but that person is trying to be killed by someone else who they don't know. So he is trying to survive in this world where someone is trying to kill his new body, his the body he's possessing. I don't know. And the point is that the story is set up well. And speaking of interesting, all of the characters and the side characters, well, most of them anyway, are really interesting. They're really fun to watch and to see them interact with each other. And this is probably more of just my own bias since I mean I've already said that I really like the way this guy writes stories. And I'm not really sure I haven't actually read any of the manga, so I don't know how accurate they are to how accurate the anime is to the manga. But anyway, I think it's pretty apparent that I really like this show. So if you are any kind of fan of isekai whatsoever, I think you will also absolutely love the show. Even if you're not, just go check it out anyway. Kubo won't let me be invisible. This show was mid. There's no other way for me to put it. It's not bad, but it's not good either. It kind of reminds me of Nagatoro, except it's less bullying and more light teasing. It's made to be cute. And I mean, on that aspect, I guess it does deliver, but maybe it's just more of my own personal preferences because I got really bored with the show. Generally, I'm not a fan of shows that are cute for the sake of being cute. Now, I know what you're thinking. If that's the case, why the fuck did I start watching this show? And that's because at the time that this started, I was actually in the mood for it. Okay, shut up. The show started way back in January and is one of the victims of the delays that happened to a few different shows at the time. Except this one was on break for a long time. Like, the first 6 episodes came out in January to beginning of February, and then didn't finish until like June. So my feelings in January were very different than what they were in June. So by the time that the show started back, my desire to watch the show had just completely gone. And honestly, I don't think that it would have changed my overall idea of the show. Even back when I first started watching it, I didn't really connect with it as much as I did shows during that season. And I didn't connect to it much at all this season. So I think that even if I had watched it like a normal show, one each week, I probably still wouldn't think very highly of this show. And again, it's probably just personal preference on my part. So if you're out looking for something cute and that's all you're looking for, it's not a bad show. But for me personally, I'm gonna have to rate it lower. That's because my heart is cold and black. Oshinoko. And now we get to our popular show for the season. Now, it's not my favorite show, but I did like it, and I can understand why so many other people liked it. The first episode is like an hour long, I think, and it does a great job of setting up the story and the themes and everything that it's going to be happening in the rest of the show. The art style is very, it pops, I guess is the way I want to put it. Probably not the best way, but it's what I'm going to use. I mean, it's a show about idols, so you kind of want the idols to stand out. One thing I think the show does really well is it shows both the positives and the negatives that goes along with idol culture. Now, we're all weebs here, so I'm sure we've all taken a look at an idol at some point, either 3D or 2D. I keep up with a few VTubers myself, so I guess I'm in that category too. They're entertaining and we enjoy watching them and watching them succeed. And on the flip side of that, there's the negatives that come along with parasocial relationships. And some people can't distinguish between fact and fiction. And some people want to hate on someone just because of a character that they played. Saying that to all the people who felt the need to send death threats to the actor who played Joffrey on Game of Thrones. So I guess people can be shitty is the the moral of the story. And this isn't a hot take or anything. And I don't think anything in this show was new or anything mind blowing, I guess. But I am glad that they decided to put all the negatives in because I think that this was a show that was all just positives and here's the good side of idols and just show them like working hard and everything to achieve their dreams. Honestly, I'd probably be bored with it and I wouldn't want to watch it. There are a few negatives in this, but I think they're kind of personal to me. One being that I'm not a huge fan of idol shows to begin with. Like, I like watching idols, but not shows about idols, I guess would be the way to put it. Well, that kind of knocked it down a few notches for me. And to kind of go along with that, there's not really a whole lot of singing or anything. And I think that's kind of common for idol shows. I don't know, I don't watch a whole lot of them, but it's probably the reason why I don't like them is because I feel like a lot of them are shows about the idols instead of any actual performances. And that's kind of what I'm more interested in, I guess. So them not having it very much in the show is a negative for me. Last thing I want to talk about is the overall story. There's two kind of main plot points, and that is Ruby becoming an idol and Aqua figuring out the mystery that happened in the first episode. And as is probably obvious, I am far more interested in the mystery part than the idol part. But there's no way that they could have just focused on that. Otherwise, the show would have been like 2 or 3 episodes long. So they do add in the idol stuff, and it kind of helps to flesh out the world and to make everything more entertaining. But my I think if I liked the idol parts of the show, this would be a an amazing show for me. But because I don't, it's just kind of an okay show. And I think whether I keep watching it, I'll end up watching the next season, but I think whether I keep watching past that is going to depend on what they do with the overall story. Because for me, if they focus too much on just the idol stuff and they still just drip feed in all the mystery stuff, and I probably won't be entertained to watch anything past the second season. But we'll see, I guess. Tengoku Daimakyou. This was definitely my favorite show for the season. They did such a great job with the action and the mystery. And I think the last time that I watched like a mystery show that I was really interested in, I think was The Perfect Insider, and I ended up binge watching that entire thing. And that the way that they did the story for that, they introduced the mystery at the beginning, and then they didn't tell you a whole lot about it until the end. But because I had binge watched it, everything was still fresh on my mind. So when they started making those connections at the end, everything was fine and it was all connected for me. But if I had watched it weekly, then I don't think I would have liked it as much. And that's one thing that I think the Tengoku does really well, because they will introduce something that doesn't seem all that important, and then the next episode or the episode after that, they will start to make those connections. They will introduce a little more information so that you start to see how everything is coming together. So the way the show works, there's two different stories happening that don't really seem to be all that connected at the beginning. But as the story is told and as time goes on, then all information gets told through each side, and all of a sudden you start seeing how they are connected. And I'm trying not to give out too much information because I think this is a show that if you haven't started yet, then it will be better to go in without having stuff spoiled. And the show didn't wrap up just yet. Hopefully, there's another season. So I haven't seen anything announced yet, but hopefully. And this will probably be a show that I need to rewatch because I think that I got everything and understood everything, but I've got a feeling I probably missed something. So it will be better to just go back and rewatch so that I can fully get the story anyway. Bit of a warning though, there is some fucked up shit. uh, as I've already stated, people in our world now are kind of shit, and the part of the story takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, and we all know people don't get kinder whenever that kind of thing happens. So you just go in expecting shit to happen. I do want to talk a little bit about the art style. Now, for the most part, I don't really have a whole lot to say. The art style was fine, except for one episode that was completely different than the other ones. It's like episode 9 or 10 or something. I don't remember exactly which episode it is, but I actually wasn't a huge fan of it. It kind of reminded me of Kill la Kill, like that kind of art style, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing. I don't want to make it sound like that's my opinion, but whenever you've gone like 8, 9 episodes with one art style, and then all of a sudden you change it for one episode, and then right after that it goes right back to what it was before, and it's just so it was too different compared to the rest of the show. So I didn't like it. And that's my only real complaint for the show. One episode that had art style that I wasn't a huge fan of. But I do hope that they continue the show and they bring it back for a second season because I really want to know what happens for the rest of the story. Mashle. No idea how you're supposed to say that. I just went with the Japanese version. But this was a good comedy at first. The basic premise of this show is that it's a magical world where they weed out anyone who's not doesn't have any magical powers, and the main character does not because he was switched at birth with Mob from Mob Psycho. At least that's my headcanon. So he's trying to survive in this magical world using only the almighty unstoppable power of muscles. Which is a great premise, and at the beginning they really delivered on it and delivered on the comedy aspect of it, which is I think where the show really shines. The only issue that I have with it is it kind of got old. and with it only being one season, and I'm already pretty much done watching the show, it's not really a good thing. And I'm not really sure where the disconnect is. I don't know at what point it stopped being funny for me. Like it is still kind of funny, but it just seemed repetitive, I guess. Because I mean, in the first couple of episodes, you pretty much get the gist of what's going to happen. He is just gonna punch magic spells or just full tank them, and then walk over and just punch the fuck out of a magician. And once you've seen that happen a couple times, you pretty much know that's going to be copy paste pretty much for the rest of the fights, and it just gets old really quick. So for this first season, I think it's fine. I think it's good enough to kind of hold up. The comedy is good enough that for the first season it's fine, but it's not something that I would probably continue watching. I'm not probably not going to watch the second season whenever it comes out. And there you go. That's everything that I've watched this last season here. And I really like this method and this way of making the videos for the seasonal stuff. So I'm probably going to keep doing it this way. But anyway, I'm going to go work on some ReZero stuff. So see ya.